So there are a number of common ways to attack authentication which apply to APIs. We'll take a quick look at these as a refresher, but then dive into how we can attack tokens more specifically in the next video. So usually we can break authentication in two ways. Firstly, the target is unprotected against brute force attacks. Now, a finding I get all the time when assessing API endpoints is a lack of rate limiting or brute force protection, which is a little bit odd because these things are quite trivial to implement, but often forgotten about. Secondly, there is a logic issue with the authentication mechanism. Now, it's also worth noting that we may be able to bypass or break authentication with things like injection attacks. However, because the root cause of the issue in this case is injection, we tend to classify it as that rather than something like broken authentication. In these types of scenarios, it's best to try and identify the root cause and use your best judgment. Now, if you're already familiar with brute force attacks, then feel free to give this lab a go first on your own. Just another thing to note, I'll be showing you two ways to pull off this attack. One with Burp Suite Professional and the other using the fuzzer FUF or FFUF. This is because not everyone has access to the professional edition of Burp Suite. The community edition is rate limited, which obviously for brute forcing makes things a little bit tricky. But if you're just beginning your journey into penetration testing, it's likely that you'll be ending up using the professional edition at some point in the future. So it'll be good for you to see how it works, even if you can't use it right now. Both techniques yield good results, so don't stress if you're strictly sticking to open source tools for the time being. Let's run through this attack together. So here I have the API brute force demo.zip in this folder. So I'm just going to simply unzip this and hit enter, and you can see it's created the folder API brute force demo. So I'm going to cd into this, clear my screen, and then I'm just going to sudo docker compose and build. And then I'll just type in my password. And I'll give it a minute to build the application. This shouldn't take long, it's not too heavy. All right, so that's built, and then we can just do the same, but instead of build, we can do up, like this. And it should be running on port 9000. So if I just fire up Firefox, and I come to, let's maximize this, localhost and 9000, we should see a brute force me page with a login button. So I'm also going to load up Burp Suite. So notice the professional edition, but you can use the community edition as well. Just know that you're rate limited, and we'll do Burp Suite first and then FFUF or FUF afterwards. All right, so what I want to do is first just test. So I'm just going to log in as admin and click login. And we get invalid password. So interesting that we get a response. It seems like it's confirmed our username. So we can confirm this by just changing the username to something that is very unlikely to exist. And we get invalid username. So we do indeed know that admin is the username. And of course, the password is not admin, but that's what we sent. So I'm just going to close this for now and then switch over to Burp Suite and come to our proxy in HTTP history. And I forgot to turn my proxy on. So I'm going to come back, switch on my proxy, send another request of admin, and then come back and have a look at this request in here. So we can see that it's saying email address and password, although this is actually a username, so just a little bit of a coding error in terms of naming conventions. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to press Control-I, or you can right-click and send to intruder. And in this case, we already know the username is admin, so I'm just going to clear these not sure what this symbol's called, but clear the highlights. And then I'm going to come back in and then highlight the password field, because this is the field that we want to replace. If we wanted to replace the user agent, for example, we would highlight the user agent, and then we would click this and then now that field is marked for our attack, but we don't want to clear the user agent in this case. I'll go over some more advanced brute force attacks later on, but for now we're just going to be using the sniper. Now, payloads wise, what I'm going to do is I'm going to load in a word list, and I'm just going to click load, and then you can see I've been on TryHackMe recently, I've been live streaming, and I think it will be in user share, whoops, not source, share, seglists, and I'm just going to go passwords, and then I want a list that's not too long. So even though we're attacking something locally, let's choose something with about 10,000 in it. So the Zato net top 10 million, and then we'll open this. Now, if you don't have seglists already installed, you can just open the terminal, sudo apt install seglists, and then you should be good to go. Obviously, I've already got it installed, but if you don't have it, you can just run that command, and then you should be all good from this point. And then all I'm going to do next is I'm going to hit start attack, and then I'm going to give it a minute to run through. Now, because again, we're attacking something on localhost, that was very quick. If it was a live web service, could be much slower, could even take hours to get 10,000 requests. Now, first thing I'm going to check for is the status code, and if I filter by this, we can see that we do indeed have a 200 response here. Something else to check is also the length. So sometimes when you log in, you might always get a 200 response, but the length of the response might be different. So sometimes there'll be subtle differences between the different headers or what's returned. So in here, it's saying Ramirez, so I'm just going to copy this, verify it by coming back to the application and hitting paste. And then we get, hey, success, here's your flag, TCM, and a flag as well. So if you're answering the questions later on, you'll need this flag. So let's do the same with FUF. So I'm just going to come back to here, and actually we're going to start off in the same way in that I'm going to come to burp suites. Oops, I'm just going to close this attack, and then proxy, HTTP history, and I'm actually going to just take this request. So I'm just going to hit Control A to select all, Control C to copy, and then I'm just going to come into cd temp, and then I'm just going to vim rec.txt. You can use Nano or Mousepad or whatever editor you prefer. So I like Vim, and I'm going to come in and change this to fuzz because we want to fuzz the password field. So I'm just going to save that. And like I say, if you want something a little bit easier to get up and running with, Mousepad is a good starting one. It's basically like Notepad, but for Kali or Linux. So next, I'm just going to type ffuf, and I'm going to pass the request flag to rec.txt. You can call this request or my file or anything you want. And then I'm going to pass the word list as user share word lists, seglists, passwords, and then the same one as before, so Zato top 10,000. And then I'm going to put the MC as 200. I think we also need to pass the protocol type as well, which I'm going to put just here. So I don't think the order matters too much, but request proto HTTP. Now, from our earlier attack, I know we're actually looking for a 200. So let's take this off for a second and see what comes back. So I'm just going to cancel this quickly. And you can see we're getting a lot of 401s. So all of these are failed requests. And if we want to check for a 200, we can just put MC 200, and it's only going to show us the 200 responses. Whoops. And you can see very quickly that it found the password. And actually, that was a lot quicker than Burp Suite. So this tool obviously is very, very fast. So from that perspective, it might even be a better tool to use than Burp Suite Pro, for example. And it does have the ability, if you change the mode, so you can, for example, put mode, and you can do, I think it's cluster bomb. I wrote most instead of mode. And this will mimic similar functionality to here, where when we have cluster bomb, we will have two inputs and it will brute force both of them. So it will be like admin, password 1, password 2, password 3, admin 1, password 1, password 2, password 3, admin 2, password 1, password 2, password 3, for example. So it will go over all the iterations of those if you don't know either. Now I tend to, in most cases, brute force one field at a time. That tends to work for me, but you can try different things and see what happens with your workflow. So this is a relatively simple scenario, and it's likely that you're going to be faced with challenges that will slow you down, such as rate limiting, such as tokens that you might need to pull out of the page and pass with requests. Cross-site request forgery tokens, for example, you might need to include in your request. So I encourage you to learn a little bit more about brute force attacks generally, as these techniques will transfer nicely to your API penetration testing skills. Now I have a little challenge for you. It's in the same lab. Now there is another user that exists within this application. And so my challenge to you is to find out their username and then find out their password and retrieve the flag, similar to as we did for the admin account. And yeah, spend a bit of time on that challenge. And as usual, we'll go through a walkthrough together in the final video of this section. That's it for now. I'll see you in the next one.